Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. On this show, we'll give you the fuel you need through motivational pep talks, the fitness tips to be your healthiest self, fortitude to push through the hardships, and focus you need to build the skills needed for the next level, no matter what that looks like to you. I'm your host, Cel Smart. I'm a wife, a mom, community leader, and fitness professional of over 18 years. I'm here to be your biggest cheerleader, advocate, and connector. Let's be amazing together. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Be Amazing podcast. And today my guest is Amy Jackson, who I had the opportunity to meet you in person at the Novice Summit in Arizona this year. And that's where we connected. And you came up to me and we had a conversation. And I just was like, I don't know, you were just like this genuine human that's in PR, which is like unheard of, first of all. That doesn't always happen. And I told you that. I was like, I've met a lot of people that have PR firms and are PR, but there was something about you that was so different and so special. And you made me just feel like, you just made me feel amazing. And I so appreciate that. So I'm excited to have you as a guest. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I felt the same way. First, when I saw you on stage, you had such a presence about you. And I like whenever that happens to me and I see somebody that would just be such a natural, brand spokesperson or media expert, I just my brain starts, going crazy. And so when I got to actually meet you, I just started sharing all this enthusiasm about your potential with PR. And I'm glad that didn't scare you away.
No, not at all. I was completely taken back by it and was so honored too, because being females, and when you get into these types of spaces, a lot of times there can be sometimes there's competitiveness, or there's there's not this free giving of compliments and love and appreciation. And I felt that so much from you. And so that's where I was like, I'm so full of gratitude. So thank you for just all of that. That's just the sweetest. Yeah. So I'm a fangirl.
Same. It goes both ways.
But I really right now want to really focus on who you are, what you do, and just the wonderful human that you are. But tell everyone a little bit about let's drill down. Who is Amy Jackson?
So Amy Jackson is a middle sister of three girls that was born in Northern California. I started out the first half of my childhood in the Bay Area, the second half of my childhood in Sacramento. And then I didn't venture very far for a long time. So I grew up, within this little triangle of Northern California. I went to Chico State. All of those places are within a couple hours of each other. And I actually ended up meeting my husband, who grew up in the same hometown in the Sacramento area, although we didn't actually start dating until the end of college. And so it was just an interesting experience to grow up and spend, the first half of my life within this, wonderful part of the state of California. What I did in my career was basically take what I had studied in school, which I finally got to a point at the end of my college time of understanding what I was interested in, and started studying PR in the journalism department. And then I took that and got an internship, which led to a job. I worked in the Sacramento area for a while in the food industry at a large global PR agency, and then convinced my husband to move back to the Bay Area because I got a job at a tech PR agency after that. So I had interesting range in my career. And that's continued on until now. Now we have two boys. We live in Austin, Texas. I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they keep me on my toes. But I've loved building a business while being a mom. And I've loved being part of this entrepreneurial community in Austin.
That's so cool. Just your journey to get where you are has been just from the little bit that I've read about you, and just the brief conversation that we had, it's amazing to me because to have the kind of business you have, be a mom of 2 boys so young, that to me is that's a lot to juggle, a lot to manage, a lot to handle. and
Yeah.
you seem to do it with such ease.
Well, I've learned how to pull in reinforcement to make it all possible. And it's been years in the making to figure it out. And it started with talking to other moms in my corporate life. So I worked in a large company for 10 years, and I went from being, you know, young and like said yes to every opportunity in my career, traveled all the time, loved doing it, to suddenly starting a family and trying to figure out, how do I like rationalize all of this enthusiasm for my career, enthusiasm for becoming a mom. And it was a little jarring at first, but I learned that if I talked to other moms and other dads, that I could get ideas on like how you do it, like how you navigate every chapter of parenting, because it's constantly changing. And then the other thing I did was I started talking to women that were entrepreneurs themselves. And I started interviewing them for a blog that was like a passion project where while I had my corporate job. And I did that for years. And it ultimately gave me the courage to become an entrepreneur myself. And I found that it's even more conducive to juggling motherhood and business because I dictate my schedule. I'm available. I don't have to travel. And so I can be available to my kids much more now than I could before.
That's awesome. And that was actually, you kind of already opened the door for this question, because I was going to ask you, like, what like stirred you wanting to be an entrepreneur? Because obviously you
Hmm.
work in corporate,
Yeah.
and kind of let me kind of pause it with that, because I also want to know, like, there's a big difference between PR and marketing.
Yeah.
So what was the desire for like what drew you to PR? Like, how did you know
Hmm.
that that was the route and not necessarily, just marketing?
Yeah. That's a great question. And it ties to your previous question too, which is, when I was working for PR agencies, that's what I was doing, PR. Like it was straight like discipline of PR. When I went in-house, as we described, going into like a corporate PR job where you're working inside of a company, then I started to be exposed to other types of marketing. I was part of a marketing team. I learned really interesting things about like leveraging data and looking at Google Analytics. And then I was able to connect that to my PR activities. And so it became much more strategic being inside of a company, being able to see all of that, being able to work side by side with a product team and start planning for how you're going to launch something or announce something very early. But the other thing that I had the opportunity to do was to try out different facets of marketing. And so ultimately, I ended up leading a consumer marketing team and really learning from the team all the different types of marketing that I hadn't done in my own career. I also started to learn about brand strategy and how interesting it is to figure out like what makes you differentiated as a brand? How can you incorporate that into your marketing activities? But ultimately, what it comes down to is the perception of your brand is really what defines your brand. And that comes back to PR and how you're being positioned in trusted media outlets or on podcasts. That often, dictates how people perceive your brand. So you can certainly try to control the messaging or the way that you present your brand visually, but it often comes back to, what do people think about you? What are the experiences that they're having with your brand? And so it was fun to see different types of marketing, but I've always had this natural interest in figuring out what is that thing that makes you special and then helping journalists connect to you. And so that's why I ultimately pursued the creation of a PR agency in 2021, is because I had been hearing from a lot of startups and new brands that wanted to figure out how to do PR for the first time, but maybe they weren't quite ready to like hire somebody to do it or hire a full service agency to do it. So I was getting a lot of questions. So no matter where I navigated my career around different facets of marketing, people always thought of me when they had questions about PR. And I was like, I could help founders and startups and small companies, and I could create an agency to do that. And so I did. That's what I did.
Which is so awesome. And there's so many, like I know just in the small business and even through like the connection there, there's so many opportunities that you can like help someone,
Yeah.
because that's what's happening with all of these small businesses and
Hmm.
individuals that are, including myself, putting myself out there and getting more exposure. And, we talked about being a fitness and wellness expert and what kind of opportunities are there. So I think what you're doing is really, really amazing and it's needed.
Thank
So
you.
those are the best kinds of products and services are
Yeah,
when you are offering a solution. So you're definitely
exactly.
doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You see an opportunity to fill a need, and that's what I did.
You're so humble about it. And, I said it earlier on in the podcast, like I have come across many people in PR and marketing. And a lot of times I feel like the actual PR person is the one that wants to be in the spotlight versus the actual client that they're working with. And that's where, for me, it's always kind of been a weird thing, because it's like they're more about promoting what they're doing versus what their clients doing. And so you were a total just fresh air, like just like, wow, okay, like she's serious, like she wants to highlight and lift up. Did you do that like growing up? Like were you kind of somebody that would see somebody and be like, hey, you need to do this? Or was there some time in college that you did that? Like where does that come from?
I got some really interesting advice from a roommate who I was studying abroad with, and we were only together for 6 weeks, but I feel like she looked like right into my soul because she basically said, "Why are you pursuing art therapy?" Which is where I just had decided to combine like my coursework in psychology with my coursework in art. And I like thought I wanted to be an art therapist. She's like, "You're like a natural promoter." And I had gotten a job in student government as like a PR coordinator. And it just so happened that like the stars aligned. I got this job. I liked it. I growing up, I had always enjoyed writing and presenting things visually. Like I did do some art and design when I was younger and thought I might want to go into that as a career. And so I was always interested in stories and storytelling. And she saw in me this natural promoter. And I am like, when I'm a fan of something, you're going to hear about it. So it evolved into seeing the potential for things that could be promoted that maybe haven't been promoted before, or being promoted in a different way than people think about these things.
I love that. And it's very much you. And now
Mhm.
you're living in, so you're living in Austin, which, hello, art. I
Yeah.
mean, like
Yeah.
you're right, like where you need to be. But I
Yeah.
think that's I didn't even know that there was such a thing as art therapy now that you say that. Like,
Yeah.
wow, okay. And what you're doing
Mhm.
is very much that way, because you have the people that you write about and the stories that you share are
Mhm.
definitely a form of creativity. It takes
For
that.
sure. Yeah. Creativity has always been a big thing for me, and creative problem solving too.
Now, so when you were in, like when you were really into the art side, did you draw, paint, or any of that? Or was it just like, how did that part, when you say art therapy, like how was that for you? What kind of steered you in that direction at first?
Yeah, so growing up, I was always doing like arts and crafts. And so it could be like making bracelets or drawing pictures, or I remember I did all these like intricate things that I learned from different places. Like I had a teacher in fourth grade that taught us how to make Ukrainian eggs, where you like use wax and you dip them in different colored water, like, and then the color sticks to where there's no wax. And so then you burn off. Anyway, it was this whole intricate process. And I like bought the whole kit to do it myself at home. And it's interesting because now I see this with my 8-year-old. Like he loves to create and build. And so it was very like physical, tangible when I was a kid. And then I think it became more like cerebral as I got older. And I wasn't necessarily like painting in my free time. And that's when I realized like this isn't my passion for life. This isn't going to be my career. I'm not going to be like a professional artist. And I find myself doing things that tap into creativity in a different way now.
That's so cool. Well, I love that. I love having that little bit of information because like you're intrigued with stories. I am as well. Which is why this podcast to me is so much fun because like I love to dive in and learn because I feel
Yeah.
like we're also we're also unique in our own way and where we whatever we end up doing, whether it's for career wise or what we end up pursuing, there it always stems if you go back and you kind of see the trail of what leads us there. That's what
Yep.
fascinates me with people. It's like, how did you get here? Like,
Right.
what was it? There's got to be like some
Yeah.
stuff like investigating and learning about like the just the process.
Yeah.
Because even for me, so my full time, I outfit and design gyms for multifamily. Well, that goes back to I have a passion for fitness, so it kind of all
Mhm.
intertwines. But if you had asked me when I was, 19 or 20, are you gonna, I'm gonna build gyms in the future? Like that would have never been, that wasn't even in my mind. So
Right.
it's just neat how like, as we grow and evolve and like how things kind of, they intertwine.
They do. Yeah.
Something really cool.
Yeah.
I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I told you before we started, I was like, okay, so you have to talk about potato farmers because yes, the low carb era. So this
Yeah.
is where I know that I'm from my understanding, like this is kind of what really kind of helped launch you forward with PR is
Hmm.
like, that
Yeah.
you really help these farmers. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I first graduated from school, in my first job, I worked at Fleischman Hillard in Sacramento, and that particular practice was really focused on helping the food industry and commodity boards. And so I worked with the US Potato Board as part of a team that included people with really clever ideas for PR and marketing campaigns, and also like a registered dietitian and a recipe developer. And basically, the potato industry was dealing with the low carb diet fads that were really popular at the time. So everything from like Atkins to South Beach. And it was really hurting the potato industry. And so we worked with them to create an educational campaign that taught people that the potatoes nutrition is actually like, really beneficial. It's how you prepare potatoes, is really what determines if they're healthy and a healthy part of your diet. And so when I started working with them, there was a marketing campaign that was put together all around the nutrition label of the potato and educating people. And very early on in my career, I had the opportunity to manage a pop-up in Chelsea Market during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, where we had a healthy Mr. Potato Head balloon in the parade. And I was able
I
to, I know,
have a
I
picture
was,
of that.
yeah, the
Okay.
visuals on it were insane.
Okay.
So that convinced a New York Times reporter, Stuart Elliott, who wrote the advertising features at the New York Times in the business section. He was like, "This is fascinating that you're doing this balloon, that you're working with potato farmers, that there's this pop-up store in Chelsea Market." And so he actually wrote a story that was on the cover of the business section of the New York Times. And I had just started my career, and it was my first time getting like such a prominent feature in such a large media outlet. But I think it's so like symbolic of my career because I've worked with, startups and interesting clients to get them featured in these like major media outlets. And nothing makes me happier than to see a client in like one of these big publications that people really pay attention to.
I love that. I love that because I didn't know that part about the parade. I think
Yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh. So we're totally gonna have to share that image
Yeah.
for sure because I think
Yeah.
that's just super cool. So once you launched that, did that just like really fire you up even more? Was that like,
Hmm.
oh, this is so me?
Yeah, yeah, that was like, I mean, getting to work on that kind of campaign that early in my career, I feel like made me so deeply passionate about PR. And, things are different now. Companies don't have the marketing budgets that they used to do these like huge brand activations. And those are companies that I like to work with. Like, I'm actually more excited to help a company that doesn't have the budget to sponsor a balloon in a parade, but instead has to figure out, okay, how do we lean into the expertise of the team? or the novelty of the product. How do we show journalists that it's really timely for what they're writing about? And luckily nowadays, technology's made it easier to know what journalists are writing about. And so you can make that connection with a company that doesn't necessarily have millions of dollars to spend on marketing.
What tips or do you have do you have some tips as far as someone that is wanting to work with someone in PR, as far as whether looking for someone to work with or maybe just getting started, like what they should, anytime that they're going in and talking to someone and kind of, interviewing really somebody to partner with or work with, what would you say to an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. One thing is to make sure that a PR agency has the same philosophy that you do as an entrepreneur. So if you're in the mindset of you test things out, you learn, you adapt your strategy, and that I feel is the best way to run PR as well, because things are so dynamic. The news cycle is constantly changing, especially if you're in a space like today in AI. Like every day, the news cycle around AI is changing. So if you're in an industry where there's rapid change happening, you need a PR agency that can adapt quickly to that. One red flag is when PR agencies overemphasize their relationships. And this is a misconception in the world of PR, is that, oh, if somebody just has the right relationships, that's going to lead to coverage. Well, that's making a lot of assumptions. That's assuming that reporters are going to stay in the same place for a long time. They don't do that anymore. Publications, face layoffs just like everybody else. Freelance writers are incredibly powerful because they're a gateway to multiple publications. So that's, one place I would say relationships can be helpful. But if you're relying on, having the same person in place at the same publication for more than a couple of years, that's not necessarily going to be the case. People move around a lot in the world of journalism. And the other thing is, we like to have balance across the types of clients we work with, so that we're not having like two clients compete for the same attention from the same reporters. And a lot of PR agencies like to specialize in like one industry or one niche, which is fine, but then you are at the mercy of like who, gets kind of the lead connection to a reporter across all the different clients they work with.
Thank you so much to Novice Studios for sponsoring the Be Amazing podcast. You might have noticed Be Amazing has a new look, new titles, and a YouTube channel. Kristen Stegall and her team helped me put a new look and strategy in place to take Be Amazing to the next level. If you want to launch a podcast, revamp your existing podcast, or hand off your production to an experienced team, schedule a call with Kristen at novicestudiosclt.com or head to the link in our show notes. So as far as like the people that you currently work with, the clients you currently have, is there anybody like right now that you have seen, like since you started working with them, see them expand and grow, or their business expand and grow, like from... Yeah, I would love for you to
like we have
highlight.
recently worked with a company that is launching a brand new service for brands that build on the Shopify platform. And as a result of helping them with, announcing their launch in the media, but also with thought leadership on LinkedIn and having an active presence on LinkedIn, they have been inundated with requests for demos. So even just like having a more consistent presence on LinkedIn, especially if you're a B2B company, that can really move the needle. And that's a compliment to what we do with journalists and podcast producers, because anytime you're featured in an outlet or you're featured on a podcast, you should be sharing that on social media. And then people see that and they want to talk to you and they want to work with you. The other feedback we've heard from some consumer brands we've worked with is that the customers that find them through media coverage are more educated on their product or service. And so they're more likely to buy or become a long-term customer, because they're not just like seeing their name somewhere, but they're learning about them. They're, getting that initial kind of education on the brand that they read about in a story that features them.
So because we're really, this to me is like really speaking to the business, like business to business side. What about like an individual, like
Mhm.
somebody, like we're taking myself, for instance, because we've talked, but like taking somebody that is wanting to grow or have opportunities to be ambassador, influencer, opportunities to expand their network, their opportunities to be seen. Uh, is that just in magazine and news and podcasts? Is that opportunities for casting calls, or do you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
what can you kind of help with that? Like, help somebody as far as navigating what that would look like?
Yeah. So for us, with our lifestyle experts we work with or consumer brands we work with, there's kind of two paths that we can take. And sometimes you can take both paths depending on what your product or service is. So one is if you have a product, we can make it available to journalists to try out themselves. So if you're willing to like ship your product across the country, then that's going to increase your chances of getting featured in different stories that are relevant to your brand. If you are an expert, and this could be in combination with having a product, or it could just be that you're an expert and you're selling a service, then journalists may be looking for you for the stories they're working on. And we have platforms we use to know who's working on what, and newsletters we subscribe to know who's working on what story and what kind of experts they may need to hear from. And we find that in certain industries, fitness being one of them, financial services being another, mental health being another, interior design, style. There's a lot of different categories where every single day there are editors and writers from national media outlets asking for your tips, your responses to questions they have. They're often on tight deadlines. So if you can respond quickly, then you have a really great shot at being featured. And then they might come back to you over and over. So we work with a stylist here in Austin, and she's been featured in Real Simple like 5 or 6 times in the last year, maybe more at this point, because sometimes if you just are a helpful resource once for an editor, they'll come back to you again and again. And or they'll feature you multiple times. And that's been the case for her with Real Simple.
That's so awesome. That's so cool. Well, that's why when we talked, it was like we had talked and you'd sent some examples, and I was like, man,
Mhm.
this is like for real. Like the stuff that you're sending is like this
Yeah.
is this is legit.
It's
So
legit and it's every day. It's
yeah,
like you could
I was
literally
like,
respond every day if you wanted to.
this is crazy,
I know.
but this is awesome information, and I think really important
Mhm.
for, especially for women, that are in small business and entrepreneurs and trying to make a name for themselves and trying to stand out. And
Right.
so I really love the fact that you focus on the expert and like what you bring to the table and focus on the skill sets. And so I was so excited to talk with you and share this information because I know that the women that are listening that will so appreciate this. And I can already think of a handful of people. I'm like, oh, Amy needs to talk to this person, this person, this person, which is how
Yeah.
this works.
Yeah, and a lot of women especially, I feel like we don't always give ourselves credit for the things that we have expertise in. And I often am sharing the fact that like your expertise is needed. Like journalists need you for the stories they're writing, and you have a real opportunity to share what is like second nature to you with other people. And you might not realize that you're an expert, but if you're doing it every day or you've been doing it for decades and you love it and you can't stop talking about it, you are an expert that is needed in the world to help make sense of things and help people and give them advice. And so, yeah.
Yeah, this right here, like that right there is so awesome because I know for myself, like I've always, and this probably just goes back to, you know, just not feeling the confidence in it to be like, oh, wait, I need to do like 5 more years in this, or I need to
Right.
get a certification in this. And it's that imposter, whatever considers imposter syndrome or whatever. Like, what do I have to say, or what am I gonna to write or put out that is it the right thing? Or is it, there's all these
Yeah.
questions. So I
Yeah.
think you are like so important and valuable to those of us that are wanting to put ourselves out there and need that guidance and saying like, no, you are like, you have what it takes. You have what's needed. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah. I think people do think like I have to have a certain number of like social media followers, or I need to have been in business for a certain amount of time. And I'm like, no, you need like a website and a headshot and a bio and something to say. And you are a spokesperson. So you don't have to wait for that moment where you're like, now I'm ready. Like just put yourself out there. And I've also had to do that for myself. I've had to, be uncomfortable and like put myself out there, and I'll make videos sometimes where I'm like, this is so embarrassing. But then I'll hear from someone and they're like, thank you for telling me about this. I didn't know about that. And I'm like, okay, then I'm going to overlook, my cringe over the actual video I made.
Well, I love that because you just broke it down and made it simple. Website, headshot, bio.
Yeah.
Like those three things, like we overlook that. Sometimes we,
Yeah.
like you said, we get so focused on like, man, my social media is not at where I want it, or I don't have this,
Mhm.
or I don't, we always focus on the what we don't have versus what we do.
Right.
And like, accentuate the positive, like focus on what you have already. And
Mhm.
then you just add on to it as you go. But
Yeah.
it's important to have coaches and important, and that's why I feel like you are. It's like you're not just like I hate to say like a PR person, but like you're a professional, but it's like you're also a coach because like
Mhm.
you're providing a lot of coaching just in how to access PR and and a confidence builder. So you're just so much more than just signing up with an agency and being like, okay, so connect the dot. Like that's it.
Yeah.
I feel like you
Thank
offer
you.
more than that.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah. Just in this conversation, I'm like, this is amazing. So I'm going to steer us away because I feel like you've given us so much good content. How can someone get in touch with you? I do want to make sure we get that right now.
Yeah. So talesplash.com is our website. We're on Instagram, TaleSplash. We're on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn personally. Amy Flynn Jackson is my full LinkedIn name. So yeah, get in touch with us. We always love, getting on a call and just figuring out where you're at in your journey. And if you think PR is something you're interested in, we can tell you more about how it works.
Where did TaleSplash come from? Like, where did that name come from? I was
Yeah.
so
So
curious about that.
as part of the creativity that I've always enjoyed, playing around with words has always been fun for me. Like, give me a challenge, like a word game or something. I love playing with words. So, I've always been a fan of whales, and I had this inspiration after watching a documentary about how in the orca population, it's like a matriarch society, but it's grandmothers that pair up and teach their pod how to survive. And I thought that was such a cool concept because here I was at 40 deciding to take the leap and start my own company. And, a lot of people think of like entrepreneurs as like, 20 somethings. And so I was kind of doing it a little bit later than that. And I loved this idea of, I was making it a very mom friendly, setup for myself and ultimately for the women I brought on board. But also that I ultimately believe that your story as a founder is what makes you special and ultimately how we can help you make a splash. And so TaleSplash was a play on word of like a whale tale, but tale being a story instead of a whale tale. So
I
TALE splash.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I just what you said about being 40, I turned 50 in 2 weeks. So I'm like, and then going into a whole different next chapter, next phase. And I don't feel I feel like I'm just getting started. Like in a lot of things, like I've been in fitness my whole life, but it's like, I just feel like there's this new thing in the works and happening and realizing like, you can do this at any age. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
It doesn't. And I take so much inspiration from people like you, from people I read about or follow, like Martha Stewart started her empire at 50. I just finished Katie Couric's memoir, and she's had so many like chapters of her career, and she's still doing so much with her, role as like a journalist and a content creator. So I take a lot of inspiration from women that continue to pursue their passion, build their career, create opportunities for other women and don't see an end in sight to that. I don't ever want to stop doing that either.
We don't have to stop because
Right.
of a number.
Right.
And I don't want that to ever be a reason why I don't push or pursue.
Right.
So that's another reason I think that we jive so well, is because you
Yeah.
have that same like-minded thinking. And that's when you get around people that are on that same track, like you fuel each other. It's like, man, like you can do it, I can do it. I so feel that. And I'm so excited for you because I feel like your business is just going to freaking explode. And I feel like there's going to be more women that are in our age range that are going to do big things and keep pushing and just show that, like, age is just a thing. It's not like, oh, you're good for your age.
Right. Right.
Right. I don't
Yeah.
want to be that.
No, I want to feel like I'm constantly trying to improve and be the best version of myself. And I'm fortunate to be surrounded by other people that feel the same way.
We're just going to keep that train on going. And
Yep.
like anybody else who wants to jump on board, come on.
Yes. Come have fun with us.
That's it. We're going to switch gears because I want to talk about your self-care. So you're a business owner and
Mhm.
you have children and you have a family, and it's all this managing all of that. What are you doing right now for self-care for you?
So, a couple things. I work out every morning with my husband. Actually, we've been doing this since we were in our 20s. So, that's like couple time and workout time and self-care all in one. But I've also started returning to some sports that I either tried in my youth or didn't try and have learned later in life, which are tennis and golf. So, I recently got back into tennis and I've been taking golf lessons, and golf is definitely a lifelong pursuit. That one's going to be a little slower to improve upon. But tennis, like I'm seeing some real progress. It's been about 6 months. And I think it's good to just, when you're in front of like a computer for a big part of your day, or you're like up in your head all the time, I think it's really good just to like get in your body again and like learn things that are more physical. And you have to like connect your, physical coordination with your brain. Like that to me has been a good form of self-care, to be challenged, to like get outside of my comfort zone in a more physical way. And then I've also tried to read more this year because when I was growing up, like I said, stories were so meaningful to me and I read all the time when I was a kid. And it's another thing my 8-year-old is doing too, which makes me proud. So I've started to really read more, like on the weekends when my kids are playing, like there's no reason I can't have a book open. And so I'm really just trying to spend more of my downtime reading, and it could be reading books about business, it could be reading books like about inspirational women, it could be reading books that are more for fun, like, summer travel kind of reading. And so I'm just enjoying like spending more time with a book open this year.
I love that. I love that that's how you are, like, you're viewing self-care, because we all view it a little bit different. And it resonates with me with the physical for sure. Like I'm the same way as far as fitness. I'm always trying to expand and try things. I started mountain biking
Nice.
last year, which scares me
It's
100%.
so hard. Yeah.
So hard, still scares me every time we do it, but I've gotten to the point where I actually like it now. So my husband and I do that together. But like I just love that. And I love the
Yeah.
fact that you're reading. So
Yeah.
these are just great examples, and just like it looks different for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a certain quote, or like is there like a song on your playlist right now that's like inspiration for you?
So the quote that has been really inspirational to me in the last couple of years is "the obstacle is the way." And I feel like in particular with business, you reach a certain maturity. I'm 3 years into TaleSplash, and you reach a certain maturity as a business where you're having to figure things out that you have never done before. Like for me, being in PR my whole career, I didn't have to really learn the financial side of things very much. I, have learned as a business owner that if you want to grow and scale, you really have to master that, but you don't have to do it alone. You can bring in, help. But I also feel like, when things feel hard in business, like keep digging in. And when you resist something, question why you're resisting it. And I've had this happen recently where I've gotten advice and I'm like, oh, that doesn't feel like something I would want to do. And then I'm like, well, actually, maybe I should try it. And then I try it. I'm like, oh, this is working.
What else would be on your heart right now? Or is there anything that you would want to share with the listeners, like a last thing that you would want to leave?
So I would just say, for me, I have learned that you have something to offer to the world. And when you realize what that is and you start sharing that, it is so rewarding. And you will hear things that you didn't even think of that you're, helping people with. And so, don't discount what it is that you have experience doing or that you spend a lot of your time doing, and making that available to other people, whether that's through a business or putting yourself out there in the media. Just, put it out there and see what the response is. That'll also help shape what people think of you, and your brand as is like, you put it out there and see what the response is. And that's been my experience. It's been so rewarding. And I just want to see other people fulfill their potential that way too.
Well, this conversation I have loved so much because again, like just meeting you and talking to you, it's been instant connection. And I think what you're doing is so valuable. And you see things through a different lens than I would think, whether it's an individual or a business, like we talked about before. Like you see it, like because you're connected to all the people that need the experts, that need people to share their knowledge. And so I just think this was like a beautiful way to share who you are, share your story, and what you offer. And I just encourage anyone that's in need of PR or wanting advice, and wanting more than just somebody to just connect the dot, but wanting somebody to give them like some real like steps forward to put themselves out there, and the encouragement and the backing behind it. Like, connect with Amy. I think you're amazing, and I so appreciate your time today and the conversation, and can't wait for this episode to drop.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and I'm so glad that we met, and I can't wait to do more together.
Yes. Thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Be Amazing podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please send it to someone who inspires you so they can feel amazing too. If you want to help us reach new listeners, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Don't forget, you can find the video versions of our episodes on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at the Be Amazing Podcast, or DM me at Cel Smart. I'll see you in the next episode.